Hello, fellow Ugandans. How are you? This is the Ugandan Apologist. This is Chulika, the Ugandan Apologist. This week, let's talk about Joel Ssenyonyi's cash envelope. And the key issue here is going to be about trust, and I'm saying trust no one. Let me explain, okay? This week ending Sunday 19th of June 2022, what has been making the social media rounds in Kampala, in Uganda, and even beyond the country is a payslip that allegedly is for the Member of Parliament, Joel Ssenyonyi. Now, that payslip has money in excess of 30 million Uganda shillings, and that's a hefty lot of money by Ugandan standards, or according to most of the people who are most Ugandans are like MPs are receiving a lot of money. It's 30 million plus. Now, we are not going to talk about whether that money is so much, whether they deserve it or not. That is besides the point. Actually, that is not the main issue here. The main issue that everyone should be focusing on is something which is far, far more urgent than the amount of money that the members of parliament are receiving or not receiving in Uganda in 2022. That payslip of Joel Ssenyonyi, the Joel Ssenyonyi cash envelope, what I'm calling the Joel Ssenyonyi cash envelope, is a symptom of a problem, an urgent problem that we need to deal with as a nation. Otherwise, our strategic national economic goals, our very own sovereign security, national security, will be compromised, definitely. And let me explain why. The short and sweet before we dig into it is that what we have to understand is that later Ssenyonyi went on his Facebook and in big red letters stamped the word fake on the payslip that was circulating and explained that that was a fake payslip, it was a fake one, it was a forgery, and that in there is the problem we are having. What do I mean? The problem we are having is fake payslips, fake news, fake everything. Now, the key problem we have as Uganda, as a country, which we must urgently attend to, is this phenomenon of fake news. Social media has not made things any easier. In political maneuvers throughout history, throughout time, different countries, fake news, propaganda, misinformation, disinformation is part and parcel of the game. But nowadays, with social media, it's taken on a whole new level. But this is very dangerous for a poor country like Uganda. When I say poor country like Uganda, resource-wise, we ain't poor, but economically, as per modern economies, we are low-income countries. It's not good news for us. So the Joel Ssenyonyi cash envelope is really bad news for us, for the simple reason that fake news is bad news for the country, and I will explain why. For starters, there are three reasons why it's bad news for the country and why you have to deal with it urgently. The first reason is, with fake news, we get poor buy-in from citizens when it comes to useful projects that are being rolled out by government. That is the first reason why fake news is very bad for us as a country, as citizens. The second reason is that fake news, propaganda, disinformation, misinformation spreads like a cancer and eats away at the very core of our national politics, of our socio-economic being, and it enters into national policy. Now, definitely, if you're using wrong data to make decisions, that is definitely bad news, but we'll go into details of that a little later. And the third reason is that the kind of fake news, the kind of disinformation and misinformation that we are using as Ugandans is mostly politically motivated, and unfortunately it comes in a form of victim mentality. So we are playing off a victim mentality as a nation. We are entering victim mentality in our psyche as Ugandans, as a nation, which is definitely bad news. Let me try to go a little deeper into that. Let me repeat once again before I continue that the Joel Ssenyonyi cash envelope, The problem is not how much money members of parliament are receiving. The problem is not how much money Joel Ssenyonyi is receiving as a member of parliament. And the real problem is the fake payslip that circulated as Joel Ssenyonyi's payslip is a symptom of a bigger urgent problem that we need to deal with as a country, and that problem is fake news in our democracy, fake news in our nation building. It's a big, big problem. And now let's dig a little deeper into the 3 reasons I have given of why it's definitely bad for us. The first reason I said is that fake news is bad for Uganda as a country because misinformation, disinformation is going to make the public, sections of the public, not buy into programs which the government is rolling out, programs that will be socially useful to the everyday citizens. A clear example is the COVID thing, the COVID vaccination. When COVID came around, there was a lot of misinformation and disinformation from a lot of quarters, political and unpolitical, wherever, about government of Uganda as led by the NRM not being serious enough because they didn't have vaccines and blah, 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 blah. So the blame game was on government through disinformation and misinformation. When the vaccines came, the very same people who were blaming government for not having vaccines, interestingly started disinformation and misinformation about how dangerous the vaccines were. The uptake of vaccination in Uganda hasn't been exactly very good compared to other vaccination drives in the past, for example. But that is basically coming down to disinformation, misinformation. This is basically coming down to fake news, and a lot of that is propagated by us Ugandans, which is pretty stupid, because if you're getting something that is useful and you're saying it is not useful, well, I definitely feel sorry for you. No one is forcing anyone to go for vaccination, for starters, but I mean, when you start disinformation and misinformation about government projects, all government projects, because either you're selfish, we have people who are sociopaths. For them, they revel in just kulemesa everyone. I believe all people listening to me understand what kulemesa means. In other words, there are people who are sociopaths who just enjoy chaos, bringing chaos for zero reason. So we have such people in the country. And these are people who are going to pass on disinformation, misinformation. They don't have any political agenda. They have zero agenda. They just love chaos. But then we also have others who are deliberate, who are politically deliberate, and they just want to disorganize government. And now, if you're disorganizing government just for the sake of making political capital, but the programs you're trying to discourage actually benefit the citizens, you don't deserve to be a politician. And that is what normal citizens should be looking into, basically. So fake news, the Joel Ssenyonyi cash envelope is bad for the country because it is a symptom of fake news, and fake news basically, one of the bad things it does is it turns government programs into rejects, because people are going to get misinformation, disinformation, others are going to promote it, propagate it, just to fail government programs, when actually government programs are helping the country, are helping the citizens. Now, it doesn't matter whether you like the government or not. I don't see why you should promote something that actually takes the country's economy backwards, or makes it move slowly, or even exposes the country to national security threats. And the second reason, that takes us to the second reason why fake news is very bad, why the Joel Ssenyonyi cash envelope as a symptom of fake news is bad for the country. And the second reason is that fake news basically is like a cancer. It slowly eats you up and starts to eat up the whole body. Now, fake news, because it is meant for the public, it is meant to influence public opinion, and public opinion, let's be very sure, public opinion can influence national policy. Now, if the evidence we are using to craft national policy is coming from propaganda. That means we are crafting national policy using the wrong information. And if we are using the wrong information, we are definitely not having the correct solutions for the problems, because all good decisions, all superior decisions depend on the quality of data you have, depend on the quality of information you have. If the quality of information you have is shitty, if it sucks, then your decision making is going to be very, very poor. And I don't think I have an example to give here, but basically that should make clear sense. That is basic common sense. If the quality of information you have is not good, then your decisions are not going to be good. If we are always passing on misinformation and disinformation for either selfish reasons, because we are sociopaths, or deliberate reasons to score political capital, this is going to creep back into national policy, and it's going to creep into economic policy, it's going to creep into national security policy, and you're going to have policies which are completely useless, which are not protective of us, which don't advance us as a country, which don't advance us as individuals. So that's why I say it is really urgent for us as Ugandans, for the government of Uganda, to actually look of ways of mitigating the adverse impacts of fake news in the country. And the other challenge we have when it comes to this propaganda, fake news eating the country away as a cancer, is that, with all due respect, Uganda currently, most low-income countries actually at the moment, they don't have critical mass of people in public service or even in the private sector whose critical thinking skills are next level. Most of our influential people at all levels, in the civil service, in the private sector, and I'm not talking only about politicians, I'm not talking only about political leaders, I'm talking about people at all levels, from the lowest up to the very highest. Most of them in low-income countries, their quality of thinking is quite mediocre. Timothy Kaliyagira, a prominent Ugandan journalist, actually says that Europeans have an A-class mind when it comes to thinking, whereas Africans have a C-class mind when it comes to thinking. Many people have had issues with him, saying he has self-hate, blah, 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 blah. But when you really look at it, the man is correct. It's not that the Africans are stupid, they don't have high IQs. No, that's not the thing. It's just that the thinking skill, the critical thinking skill, is still lacking. And this is what you have to understand. You might have a high IQ, you might have a genius level IQ, you might even have a PhD, but if your critical thinking skills were not trained well, you'll still suck at thinking. It's not like you're born knowing how to think right. Thinking critical, real, superior, next level critical thinking is something you learn. It is something taught either in school or outside school, but most schools don't exactly teach next level critical thinking. And that is the challenge we have as a country. That is the challenge we have as Uganda, as a low-income country, that most of the people who are making major decisions for the country at all levels, not only political, go to hospitals, go to universities, go to private schools, go to private businesses. Most of those people go to our celebrities who are influencers. Most of them, their thinking skills, their critical thinking skills, they're mediocre, they suck. And when you have people in positions of influence whose critical thinking skills suck, and you add propaganda to that, you add fake news to that, wow, that is disaster. If, on the other hand, we had a critical mass of people who's in government and outside government, whose critical thinking skills are next level, then that can somehow mitigate the adverse effects of fake news. It can balance that out, which is what the high-income countries today have. They also have the same problem of fake news, but they have a critical mass of professionals, influencers whose critical thinking skills are next level. So that balances out the negative effects of the fake news. We urgently need, as a country, to up our game as far as critical thinking is concerned. If you think of civil service in the UK, they have the success profile, I think, which before they take you into civil service, you have to do the success profile. If you fail it, bro, you ain't gonna get in. Look at China, look at Japan. They've got tough criteria for people getting into civil service. And what this does for you is to teach you real critical thinking. And people study for these exams. People study to get these skills. So by the time they get into government, by the time they get into positions of influence, they are not only clever, I mean, everyone is intelligent, but you already have next level critical thinking skills. So that is the other big challenge, the urgent challenge we have to address as Uganda, really. And finally, the third challenge is that with this fake news, most of it is politically motivated. Uganda's fake news currently, most of it is politically motivated. And what that means is that we are playing it out from a victim mentality kind of scenario, because we think that if you want to blame government for anything, if you want to blame the opposition for anything, but it's mostly if you want to blame government, if you want to show that Uganda is not doing well, you should show the very worst of Uganda. You should only show bad things about Uganda. Now, don't get me wrong. I am not saying that if there is bad things happening, don't talk about them. Don't point them out. But there is a difference between constructive criticism coming from a point of strength where you believe in yourself. You're like, okay, this is going wrong, but we can actually get it right. That is constructive criticism. And having a victim mentality. Because all you're going to see when it comes to fake news, or even what passes off as criticism, is imagine this country is doing this, but Uganda is doing that. This country is doing this, but Uganda is not doing it. You're like, what the hell are people talking about? Why don't you see the positives in Uganda? You see, when you're coming from a position of being a victim, it's not going to help you. When we come to mental health, actually, if I'm to borrow from mental health, the more, if you always have this narrative of negative stories, you're actually going to go down the route of getting into depression. And seriously, you're going to get down into depression. You're going to get paranoid. And if you're starting to get paranoid, you're probably going down the route of becoming psychotic. Now, if we are getting this victim mentality into our national psyche, we are going down the route of madness. A few weeks ago, there was this thing of 14 million Ugandans have mental distress. There are issues with those statistics, they're problematic. Another day, I'm probably going to talk about it and show you why those statistics are wrong. But man, if we are coming from the victim mentality, all the fake news we have is from this victim mentality kind of thing. We are victims, which honestly is pretty stupid. It's not helpful, because if you're always crying that you're a victim, you always look for more things which make you a victim. And when you're a victim, you don't want to do anything for yourself. You don't want to advance your economy. You're not going to give a damn about the security of your nation. You're just going to be hopeless. So we need to have constructive criticism. Constructive criticism is not about a blame game. Constructive criticism is actually seeing something but protecting yourselves. Because let's be honest, the more you make yourselves victims, the rest of the world sees you as stupid. You might think when you cry out that you're a victim, you're doing so badly, the rest of the world will have pity on you. No, we live in a dog-eat-dog world. Nobody gives a damn about you. So if you make yourself look weak and a victim, those other dogs are going to pounce on you. They're not going to help you. Don't think about this nonsense of the Western world is going to help us if we cry victim. We say we're in a dictatorship. China is going to help us if we say we are doing so badly. Nobody gives a damn about you. People are only going to give a damn about you if you come from a position of strength. So fake news for Uganda is bad, because the kind of fake news we're even passing on, the kind of misinformation and disinformation we are passing on about ourselves, is from a victim mentality kind of lens. It's not good for our economic progress. It's bad for our national security. And finally, to wrap this whole thing up, when it comes to national security, the new front line for fighting wars nowadays between governments, between countries, is cyberspace. We are moving from the traditional stuff of tanks and planes, we still have them, and guns. We are moving into cyberspace. You have Russia hacking into the US, the US hacking into China, China hacking into Germany. That's the kind of stuff we are going in. And now, if all we are doing, if we don't take any serious action about misinformation and disinformation, we are compromising our national security, because that means we have a very weak starting point when outside countries, when hostile countries attack us via media, via misinformation and disinformation. They'll do it, and we'll take it up as Ugandans. Will stupidly take it up because we believe everything we see. And when we actually don't know that these hostile countries are just sabotaging us using fake news. That's why we really need to look at this Joel Ssenyonyi payslip, what I call the cash envelope, as something urgent we have to work on, which is why I said that don't trust anyone. Don't trust anyone. Think for yourself. Think for yourself. In other words, they say webededemu, but webededemu doesn't have to be for Chiwanyi. Really think for yourself. In conclusion, Joel Ssenyonyi's cash envelope is not the most urgent thing we need to be discussing as Ugandans. But what we need to be urgently discussing, what we need to be seriously debating as Ugandans, as a country, in intelligence circles, in government, in opposition as individual citizens, is the simple fact that the Joel Ssenyonyi cash envelope is a symptom of fake news in the country. And fake news, like we have said, is bad for Uganda, is bad for citizens. Number one, because it makes citizens reject useful government programs. Number two, fake news is a cancer which eats into our decision making, which ends up in our national policies, which means we end up making national policies which are hopeless. And finally, our fake news is coming from a victim mentality where we think by making ourselves victims, others are going to help us, but that is nonsense. Nobody gives a damn about you. And that basically is that. Now there's 5 resources I'm going to recommend to you if you're really interested more about this thing of fake news and what to do about it. It's 3 books. It's 4 books actually that I'm going to recommend for you, and Netflix documentary. Allow me to read them out for you. The first book is Trust No One by Michael Grothaus. The second book is The Reality Game by Samuel Woolley. And the third resource I will recommend is a Netflix documentary. It is called The Web of Make-Believe, Death, Lies, and the Internet. And you go and specifically watch episode 2, A Murder in DC. The fourth resource I'm recommending is a book, Mental Models, 30 Thinking Tools That Separate the Average from the Exceptional, written by Peter Hollins. That will help improve your critical thinking skills. Remember, I said our critical thinking skills are still mediocre, but these are things we can learn, we can improve on them. And the last resource I will recommend is a book. It's called Woke Racism by John McWhorter. It's written by a USA resident. Basically, it has a lot of stuff in it, but one of the key things it talks about is blacks across the world having this kind of victim mentality and why it is actually bad for us. So yeah, these resources, they'll help you along those lines. Until next time, stay safe, take care, but I will leave you with one question. What steps are you taking to make sure that your country progresses economically, your country's security is solid? What steps are you taking to make sure that Ugandans and Uganda at large doesn't suffer the adverse effects of fake news. Stay safe. Like I said, take care. I am still Bikanchulika, the Ugandan apologist. Thank you.